all the silly little animals sleeping by the side of the road, or how I learned to bemusedly deal with these strange and lovely dystopian times without you. A.K.A. The Tragedy of My Rival Self-Published Novelist. Chapter 3. Call It a Sign of the Times, and how the bounty for the missing alpaca drove the whole town of Deptford absolutely mad, and eventually shook up the entire nation's ontological security. Those were the nights I sat on the floor of my room and watched every passing headlight brighten up the walls of my room. Even after cup of sleepy time tea, I could not fall asleep. I stared at the meager sewing desk in my room, which was where I usually wrote all through the night, though, at this time, I intentionally took a hiatus from the toxic scene of self-published novelists, which I experienced up close while I studied abroad in Stockholm. The issue was that, without writing, I had no idea what to do with myself. So I stayed up all night and mulled over my life decisions. All the sleepy time tea did was make me more lethargic and envious of the sleeping population. Sometimes I wandered around the house in a delirious state. I stumbled through the hallway as though intoxicated. I milled around the house, feeling as though I were looking for something or someone. I felt out of sorts. I felt as though at any moment someone may find me. I felt something brush against my ankle. I sprung to the side. I looked down. It was a dog toy. It was a stuffed animal lamb. One night, I heard faint sounds of Anastasia's pan flute from down the hall. I lumbered over. I secretly peered into her room. As I looked through the opening of the ajar door, I saw Wooly on Anastasia's bed. He gazed around the room. This pan flute Anastasia practiced with was a newer model, and not the one passed down through our family generation after generation. This pan flute was versatile in shape. It was fashioned in a slanted form with smooth varnished bamboo. For several minutes, I observed Anastasia's precision and focus. She slouched to the side. Her hair coated the left side of her face. I couldn't see her eyes. Anastasia acquired much of our father's genetics, as did I, and so her hair always looked disheveled and knotted, which is a common characteristic of members of my father's tribe. She was awake, so it seemed, though it was difficult to know for certain. Sometimes Anastasia practiced the pan flute in her sleep. The idea of her being awake comforted me. I felt as though the two of us were on the same deserted island, and I noticed her existence from afar, without her acknowledgement. All the pets were in her room. Our dog Francis was in a lopsided position on the floor by Anastasia's fuzzy socked feet, which hung off her bed and grazed Francis's fur while his paws scratched the air above the sheets Anastasia previously kicked away. And Harold was asleep on the foot of Anastasia's bed, with his chin hanging over the edge of the bed. Eventually, Anastasia turned towards the door. "You know, I know you're watching me." I nodded. I went into her room. Harold perked his head up. He looked at me and began to breathe with his tongue out, as if smiling. "Having a nice pan flute session there, Anastasia?" I inquired. She nodded. I was about to sit on the twin bed adjacent to her bed, and Anastasia said, "Don't sit there." I looked it over once more. A monstrous pile of clothes sat on the bed. "Okay, I won't." I sat on the floor with my back against the side of the bed. A loose shirt fell off the bed. Harold leapt off Anastasia's bed and paced over to me. He enthusiastically wobbled side to side and breathed directly into my face. He picked up the fallen shirt and held it in front of me. This was one of his favorite things to do. I gently took the shirt away from him and tossed it behind me. Harold sat down next to me. He lied down. He rested his chin on my crisscrossed legs. This was one of his other favorite things to do. Sometimes, I spent hours on end lying around with the dogs. I rolled around with them on the floor. I playfully wrestled with them up until they became too rambunctious. Our dogs thought of me as one of their own. Wooly, on the other hand, mainly stayed around Anastasia. While she was away, Wooly hid in her room. Usually, he hid in her closet. Say, "Stasia, remember that performance we went to at that church sort of place? You know, the one where They reenacted our father's tribe's seasonal sacrifice. I remember it every time I close my eyes. Do you suppose the reenactment was indeed similar to the real tribal ceremony? I ask that to myself every time it comes up in my head. To me, there is something about how the sacrifice smiled as they died that somehow felt realistic. In the pamphlet, it was noted that it was a great honor to be chosen. For some reason, the only part that didn't feel legitimate was how the stone didn't actually hit the sacrifice. The fact that that's the only part I know is fake keeps that exact image in my head. Yes, well, it was truly captivating to learn about our father's tribal heritage, even if the reenactment wasn't entirely accurate. For all we know, the whole reenactment was completely off. Perhaps, I said. I did enjoy the tribal hymn and the dancing. It did sound similar to your pamphlet arrangement. Anastasia nodded. On another note, I said. Anastasia perked her head up, as though she were one of our dogs hearing their name called. I noticed recently the window in Adalberto's room was unlocked. Did you notice anything unusual lately? Do you suppose someone snuck into our home and is about to take us all out? Did you say it was left open? Anastasia sat up and leant against her pillows and the headboard behind her. Well, do you suppose there could be another reason why I found it open? Maybe Adalberto opened it and forgot. Maybe he did. Adalberto hadn't been home for some time, though. Maybe he left it open before he left. Well, that would make sense if Adalberto knew how to open those windows. Fine, you caught me. I nodded. Are you disappointed? Not at all, actually, I said. I simply would like to know why. I keep waking up and hearing things. Could you please elaborate? I hear noises, sounds, and movements coming from outside. You still think about the night our mother's car was broken into, and how you didn't wake up to hear it? Every night, Anastasia said. So when you wake up hearing noises, you look out the window in Adalberto's room to check if the coast is clear. Pretty much, Anastasia said. And have you seen anything yet? Nope. Every time there's nothing there. It's still the same driveway. The only difference is that our mother's car isn't there. She's at the school with Dad, decorating for a performance that's still months away. And so even though every time you check and there's nothing there, you still check the next time and forget to lock the window. Am I completely insane? I don't believe so. The noises are likely projections of what you wish you heard. It's your subconscious inflicting an anxiety in your sleeping mind. Anxiety can be beneficial. It prepares you to survive. At least, that's what psychologists have stated. So it's okay that I wake up, but silly if I check. Both are fine. It's only silly you forget to lock the window. Aside from that, Gisalda would be proud. There's definitely something going on in our town. Any day now, we'll have some scrappy, nameless people sneaking into our house, prepared to physically engage with us for the snacks in our pantry. We need to be ready to defend our home and our livelihood when the time comes. Naturally, that is word for word from what Gisalda said. Are you prepared for those potential circumstances, though? I wouldn't call them potential, though, yes I am. I felt a build-up of phlegm in my throat. My voice cracked. I must say, I do feel reassured with you home. Thank you, Stasia. With what you did while you studied abroad, those nameless people should be afraid of you. Well, I do need to hold back. I'm sure detectives are searching for me. True. If anyone asks for you, I'll make sure to act clueless. What will you tell them? You're not even related to me. Good, I said. I don't even know your name. Nice, I said. I wouldn't even know how to pronounce the name you're telling me. Precisely. Me neither, I said. Anastasia sunk deeper into her pillows and blew out a flustered breath. I ruffled through Harold's neck scruff. He tilted his head back and looked towards Anastasia. Anastasia squinted and turned her head to the corner of the room. Wait, did you hear that? Anastasia asked. What was that? I heard something. What was it? I am pretty sure I heard a high-pitched sound. Perhaps it was an animal racing through the woods. This is a time when all those nocturnal creatures stir around. Obviously, this sounded different though. This sounded as if it was an animal squealing because it was in danger, but it wasn't an animal. I'm sure it was an animal. Most animals only have two speeds. They either calmly stroll around, Sunday morning pace, or they bolt away as though their life is on the line. There's nothing to worry about, Anastasia. I heard it again. You heard what? I heard the high-pitched sound. Stasia, it was probably an animal rushing away from a predator. This was different. I'm going to see what it is. Alright, are you going to look out at Alberto's window and leave it open again? No, I'm going out there. I'm tired of looking out the window. I want to see it firsthand. Anastasia rushed out of her room. Willie flinched. Anastasia, I said. I followed her. The two of us went down the stairs. The dogs loudly clobbered the stairs behind us. Anastasia opened the back porch door. As we stepped out, we saw a faint red light up the foresty hill past the stone wall, which bordered our backyard. Anastasia was right. A high-pitched siren rang out. It wasn't an animal. It was our neighbor's home security system. Our dogs skidded back inside. I gently grabbed Anastasia's shoulder. Stasia, maybe we should watch from Adalberto's room. No, I need to get a closer look. Looks as though they are ransacking our neighbors. Those must be the nameless. Those might be the same people who broke into our mother's car. I want to know what we're up against. Stasia, maybe they broke into our neighbors' cars, then ours, and then they ransacked the neighbor's house. Shouldn't we protect our house before they come for us? That's exactly the point. Anastasia slipped on her shoes. Her long, clumpy hair once again completely coated her face. She tightened her laces and tucked the laces inside her shoes. I was surprised she could see the laces she tied. She grabbed a flashlight from the counter. She stepped outside and stood by the patio. I watched her from the porch, barefooted. The noises from our neighbor's house persisted. Usually, our neighbors weren't a loud crowd. A fire developed in their house. A smoke alarm went off. Anastasia stared out into the distance. She turned back to me and said, "Quick," while there was a pause. She tore ahead towards the woods. I should have put on my shoes ahead of time. I grabbed one of my shoes by the doormat. I sat down on the window seat. I tied the shoe. I double knotted it. Harold brought over my other shoe. I took it out of his mouth. I tied that one. I grabbed the other flashlight. I went outside. I shut the screen door behind me. I felt the presence of a leaf in my shoe. I stepped off the porch. Anastasia deserted me. I looked around. I tried to pinpoint where she went. I didn't have a clue. I decided to take the upper ground. I jogged towards the part of the woods further from the neighbor's house. I would trace my way to the side to catch up to Anastasia from afar. It would be a solo pincer movement. I neared the stone wall, which bordered our backyard. I hesitated. The stone wall perimeter represented a boundary in my head in which I thought not to cross. Even our dogs never crossed it. Up until this point, I thought the stone wall would deter trespassers. I picked up my pace. I climbed over the stone wall. I stepped into the brush. I looked around for signs of movement. I shut off my flashlight. I figured the flashlight could attract attention. I gradually began to see clearer in the dark. My eyes adjusted. I made my way up the hilly slope. I realized there could be someone or something lurking around that could take me out, and I had nothing to defend myself. I tripped on a loose root and fell on my forearms. I patted the leafy brush for a handhold. As I gathered myself, I felt the stone on the ground. I picked it up. It was smooth and ovular. I put it in the pocket of my robe. I headed through the brush along the hilly region. The train grew steeper. I looked behind me. I saw our house in our backyard. We left so many lights on. Any nameless person would see this as a target sign. I climbed over some boulders. I looked out in the direction of the neighbor's house. I heard rumbles and bangs from inside. I crept closer. The fire picked up by the top of the house. The roof peeled downward. One person was on top of the roof. They waved their hands in a motion as though to simmer down the fire. The noises inside continued. What could be going on in there? In the other direction, I saw the silhouette of a person crouched low in the brush. It was Anastasia. I crept towards her. I felt my blood course as I took each step. If someone saw me, I'd be thought of as an accomplice and would be killed. I neared Anastasia's position. I started to crawl. Before I called out to her, someone rushed towards me. The person was dressed in black. They wore a black mask. They noted my presence, though streamed past me. I stagger-stepped towards Anastasia. She noted the minuscule noise I made. She glanced over her shoulder. I dove down. I rolled towards her and paused 10 or so yards away. I saw the person dressed in black enter through the window. Somehow, they knew the window would be open. The professionalism wasn't common with the nomadic groups of people known as the Nameless. I continued to roll towards Anastasia. I whispered her name. She didn't hear me. I whispered her name again. I understood that she did hear me, though she didn't respond. I crawled up to her. "Stasia," I said. "What?" She whispered in a tense tone. Maybe we watched from the distance. It might be difficult for them to tell which side we're on. And which them would that be? Both of them, I said. Let's maintain our position and only attack defensively. I believe that is the polite course of action to take. Fair. By the way, are you armed? Do you have anything to fend them off with? Anastasia asked. I have a stone. A stone? Anastasia turned towards me. I fare well with stones. Okay, Anastasia said. Anastasia and I crouched down in the sloped brush. I noticed that the nameless person on the roof, who seemed to fan the fire, actually waved to receive aid. The nameless person was stuck. The place where they came from sprouted flames. The flames centered in on them. We heard a scramble of people inside the house. There were clatters and thuds against the walls. How many people broke into the house? I heard yelling. I heard intense battle cries. I heard thuds of what might have been bodies dropping. The back door swung open. A nameless person hobbled outside. They limped off the porch and stumbled to the ground. They wore jeans and a flannel torn along the sleeves. They feebly stood up. I realized their flannel wasn't torn. The nameless person lost an arm. The nameless person on the roof made a peculiar sound. The one-armed one rose and looked up. The nameless person on the roof made hand motions. The one-armed one shook their head. The nameless person on the roof pointed at the fire, which began to suck the roof down. The one-armed one shook their head again. The one-armed one limped towards the edge of the roof with a trot. The nameless person on the roof leapt off the edge. The one-armed one stretched their one arm out as though to catch the jumper. The remaining arm they did have was bent the wrong way at the elbow. The airborne, nameless person fully extended their arms, not in a way to be caught, though more so to aim for the one-armed one in an effort to cushion their fall. I covered Anastasia's eyes. Actually, I missed. I covered her nose and mouth. I opened my eyes to the two nameless people lying there, side by side. The one who jumped tried to stretch to get up, though was unable. Through one of the windows, we saw many nameless people race around. Soon, a couple nameless people ran out from the house. One of them climbed out the first-floor window and sprinted towards the woods. Another one, with a bandana over their face, bolted out the back porch door. The bandana covered most of their eyes. They face-planted off the porch. As they got up, they looked around. They circled the ground, perhaps to note any of their living comrades. They noted the two nameless people lying motionless on the ground, and shortly noted movement in our direction. They paused. They took a knife from their belt. Slowly, they walked in our direction. The knife was long. It was a kitchen knife. It was thin. You could see it glint as the nameless person clutched it. They approached Anastasia and I. Anastasia nudged me. I looked at her. She mouthed the word, stone. I nodded. I felt the stone in my hand. I caressed it. I felt it warm up. I prepared to leap up and hurl the stone at the nameless person approaching. The nameless person walked with confident steps towards us. For a split second, the nameless person glanced back at the house. Right then, I hurled the stone. I aimed directly for the side of their head. A rush rolled through me. The stone sailed towards them. It struck the side of their neck. They breathed in a hollow breath. The stone must have jolted their windpipe. They stumbled down to their knees. They gasped for air. They hyperventilated. Anastasia whispered, "Looks like you killed them." "Perhaps," I said. It was purely a defensive maneuver, though. I take no pleasure to be murderous. Without meaning to, I curled my lips into a smile. As the nameless person died an agonizing death, something scampered out the back porch door. Two nameless people in bandanas rushed out the back porch door after it. The two pivoted and looked around. One of them went in one direction, and the other continued to twist and turn in place. They scanned the ground. One of them saw the fallen nameless person I killed, though they were too preoccupied. The nameless person who idled in place by the porch bent low and looked under the porch. Something rushed along the ground, and these two nameless people were after it. One of the nameless people dove in an effort to catch the rushing thing. They landed on the ground with empty arms. Inside the house, there were loud thuds and bangs. The roof started to curl over. The nameless people searched the ground. They dove again and missed. Finally, I realized that the scampering thing was our neighbor's house cat. The other nameless person dove for the cat again and caught it. They rolled onto their back and clenched it in their arms. As they rose, the nameless person held the cat. The cat didn't squirm around or anything. The cat looked comfortable being held by a stranger. I looked at Anastasia. She squinted her eyes. I never saw her so focused. "We can't," I said. "We have to hold back." She breathed out through her nostrils. "Stasia," I said. She didn't respond. I grabbed her shoulder. "We can be compromised." "What if it was Wooly?" she asked. "It's not Wooly." "I know that. Hypothetically, I mean. What if it was someone else's Wooly?" "Well, it is someone else's Wooly." "Exactly. If Wooly was in danger, I would obliterate any living thing in the way." "Stasia," I said. She shook my hand off her shoulder. She took off after the nameless person, with the cat swaddled in their arms. The nameless person didn't register Anastasia right away. They turned in her direction. Anastasia shoved them with all her body weight. The cat leapt out from their grasp. The nameless person stumbled to the ground. The cat scampered off into the woods. Quickly, the nameless person gathered themselves. Without turning back, they broke towards the woods in a different direction as the cat. I loudly whispered Anastasia's name. "Stasia," I said. She didn't respond. She stutter-stepped in the direction the nameless person went. She kicked off a stone. She leapt down the hill. She paced low to the ground. I tore after her. I ran down the hilly slope. I heard touches of footsteps ahead. I turned on the flashlight. I turned the flashlight off and back on again. The light flickered. The battery must have been low. I clenched the flashlight as though doing so would make it work. I clenched the flashlight as if doing so would save me. I slipped in the brush. I lashed on to the trunk of a tree. It was abrasive. Surely the maneuver caused my skin to tear. For all we knew, the nameless people could have an underground network of tunnels and could pop up at any moment and surround us and capture us and force us to join their cause. The nameless people were scrappy and barely cared about their own existence in general. Likely, they didn't mind risking their lives to kill us. Perhaps, if our neighbors were still alive, they might even come at us in full force, defining us as accomplices. Even a local vigilante could mistake us for one of the nameless people. Still, I proceeded, already flabbergasted. I paced along the underside of the hilly slope. I ducked under the branches. I cautiously stepped over roots. It was dark. I could barely see. The leaf in my shoe felt dreadful. I paused and tracked around. I looked back and faintly saw the raging fire at the neighbor's house. Deep in the distance, I saw the lights from our house. It was the optimal time for the nameless people to break into our home and burn our whole house to dust. I continued after Anastasia. Each step I took was a guess. I grasped the flashlight tight. I grasped the flashlight so tight, somehow the lens started to loosen. I pushed the lens in, which caused the lens to fall out. The flashlight's light was even less effective. I patted the ground with my hands for the lens. As I did, I heard footsteps behind me. I glanced over my shoulder. I couldn't see much aside from the faint outlines of branches. I wondered if it was Anastasia that was behind me. I hoped it was her footsteps. I felt comforted for a moment, until I heard a scream ahead of me. It was unmistakably Anastasia. It was Anastasia's scream. If that was her, who followed me from behind? Anxiety ripped through me. I abandoned the flashlight lens. I carried on directionless through the woods. I thought if I pretended not to acknowledge whoever pursued me, perhaps I would receive more time alive. Surely the assailant would like to build more suspense. I called out for Anastasia. I shouted her name. I heard no response. I understood that her response could put her in danger. I understood that my voice could bring me the wrong kind of attention. I jogged deeper into the woods. I felt as though the person gained on me at a deliberately slow pace. The person had their eyes on me from a calculated distance. I trekked up the hill. The landscape opened up. Trees were more spaced out from each other. I was out in the open. I had minimal coverage to obscure me from other deadly individuals. I walked languidly. I listened in for anything surrounding me. All I heard was insectile sounds and the crinkling of the forest brush beneath my feet. I continued towards a small body of water. The ground was soggy. The small body of water looked as though it was more of a dent in the ground, filled with water. My shoes came up soaked in mud. Nearby, I heard someone take a breath. I looked to my right. Here I thought I was followed from behind, and it turned out they were right ahead of me. I saw a red laser beam line up on the ground ahead of me. I stood still. I watched the red laser beam inch closer to my feet. I watched it rise along my thigh and set directly on my chest. I didn't feel anything. It was a red beam of light. Someone aimed at me. I looked ahead and saw no one. Perhaps it was the vigilante. Perhaps they planned to eliminate all witnesses. I heard another breath drawn. This one came from behind. I wanted to glance over my shoulder and see who it was. Maybe it was Anastasia, who was about to watch me get shot in cold blood. I closed my eyes. Perhaps this would be my final resting place. I couldn't believe I would die with a leaf in my shoe. I drew out a breath. I felt that it was the right thing to do. I heard someone take a breath again. Frantic footsteps staggered around me from behind. I hoped that it wasn't Anastasia. I hoped that she wouldn't be caught in the crossfire. I opened my eyes and looked behind me. I couldn't resist. I needed to see who watched me from behind. An arrow whizzed by the side of my head. Finally, I saw them. I saw them drop to the ground. It wasn't Anastasia. It was a nameless person with a bandana over their face, except their face was shot off from their face, from that arrow. The nameless person died immediately. I was sure of it. I glanced back to where the arrow was shot. The light was gone. I saw no one. Someone was on my team, unbeknownst to me. I paused. I wasn't sure if I should have said thank you or line up to be shot next. A few moments later, I walked away. I gradually picked up my speed until I began to jog. I jogged towards our home. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. Someone else was nearby. The person closed in on me. I sprinted down the hill. I kicked off the edge of a boulder and spun around the trunk of a tree. Sounds of footsteps appeared close to me. I kept onward. I strode by the stream which led to the pond in our backyard. I crossed the bridge. I got to the other side of the bridge. The figure was right at my side. I wrapped my arm around them and pulled them to the ground with the weight of my body. As the two of us tumbled to the ground, I noticed who it was. "It's you," I said. "Yeah, get off me." "Sorry, are you all right, Stasia?" "Yeah," Anastasia said. "Where did you go?" "I chased them away and lost them deep in the woods." "What did you do?" "You killed another one. I saw the body. How did you even do that?" "Let's get inside," I said. They could go for us next. Quickly, we headed back towards our backyard. The storm lights on our back porch shined down on us. Wooly stared at us through the porch's screen door. Wooly began to paw the screen door. We went inside, and Anastasia scooped up Wooly like an infant. She carried him upstairs. I followed her. The dogs trailed behind me. She went into her room. I stopped by her doorway. Something seared the inside of my chest. I breathed in raspy breaths. When Anastasia registered that I was right there, she turned around with Wooly in her arms. With her free hand, she put her pan flute on her dresser. She adjusted the LED lights. Wooly shook his head around at the sight of the lights as they changed sporadically. I stepped inside. I trudged over the clumps of unwashed laundry on her floor. She stared at me. She grasped Wooly tighter in her arms. She turned to the side as though to hold him away from me, as though I was a threat to his livelihood. I realized that Anastasia felt emotionally affected by what occurred, though she didn't appear to fully believe it. I detected a faint tinge of her understanding the gravity of the events. I gathered my breath and stood up straighter. I nodded at her. She continued to stare at me. I nodded again and left the room. That same night, a family's domesticated alpaca fled its enclosure. Someone attempted to steal it as a potential food resource and failed. The alpaca leapt over the fence, which outlined the property, and escaped. Local community organizations scheduled multiple search groups. Volunteers combed the trails in neon green reflective safety vests and called the alpaca's name. All throughout town, flyers were posted with a photo of the alpaca. The alpaca was overweight and had shaggy, unkempt tan fur. On the flyers there was a handsome reward stated for the alpaca's finder. The reward enticed many people. More people volunteered. Professional hunters and Army veterans and members of special intelligence agencies even joined the search. For a while, the alpaca's footprints were recovered, although they were always found a day late. The alpaca was on the move. The alpaca was missing for 2 weeks. Time was running out. New flyers were posted with an even greater reward. The alpaca was in high demand. More search groups were organized through social media platforms. Help us find our furry friend. Do it for the kids. People who searched for the alpaca invested in advanced technological equipment. Hunting cameras were placed in the woods. Lookout platforms were secured in trees. Military-grade infrared drones patrolled the town of Deptford at night. People brought in alpacas that looked nothing like the photo. Some people brought in goats, donkeys, and sheep. Some were alive, some were dead. While at work, I saw the drones pass over our town center. Some of the drones were shot down competitively. People from neighboring towns participated in the search. Some people thought the search contributed to violent behaviors and stayed home and laid low throughout this time to avoid conflict. Another family's alpaca was caught and killed. It was returned to the family of the missing alpaca, and it was identified as their neighbor's alpaca. The reward for the missing alpaca increased again. Reporters interviewed the participants. Some were in it for the reward. Some planned to hold the alpaca captive and ransom it for a greater fortune. This was an important creature. Some were in it for the glory of capturing the alpaca. They anticipated fame and celebrity status. There would surely be a photograph in the paper of the person who recovered the missing alpaca. People love a tender, heartwarming article, such as a missing alpaca reuniting with its family. Some didn't know about any financial compensation for the alpaca's capture, and still searched for the alpaca. Some believed the alpaca should be left in the wild, and those who did believe so countered the volunteers searching for the alpaca. There were those who thought this was an opportunity to perhaps weaponize the alpaca, as a defensive measure, of course. Others understood that this alpaca did not have the abilities to survive in the wild. The alpaca was coddled growing up. It was a vegetarian. It never killed anything beforehand. Up until this point, the alpaca didn't do anything remarkable in its entire life. Some planned on using the alpaca as a food resource. Food resources were scarce for those not well off. Some sought to shave the alpaca. An alpaca's mane could be shaved and used for wool that could therefore be used to retain warmth with the approaching winter season. You couldn't be certain what the volunteers' intentions were. You couldn't be sure if people were volunteering for the search. There were some groups of people out on trails with locating equipment for reasons not related to the missing alpaca. When people in these groups were questioned by reporters, they gave vague answers. There is something out there. When we find it, we will show everyone. There were multiple conspiracy theories. One of them was that the alpaca was already found, and the finder was waiting for the reward to go up through the roof. New flyers were constantly posted around town with higher and higher reward amounts. The benefactor was really dedicated. Apparently the benefactor, the individual offering the reward, wasn't even related to the owner of the missing alpaca. Another theory was that the alpaca escape was staged, and that the alpaca was never missing, and the whole event was an odd method of promoting a new movie. Even the local reporters were competitive. Some of them gave the others false leads. One reporter followed a false lead and was captured and held for ransom. Somehow, the only thing that would suffice for the reporter's release was the alpaca. Another reporter was killed gruesomely and tied to a tree by the reservoir. On a television broadcast, a local news correspondent claimed that it was the alpaca that killed the reporter. The alpaca was violent. The alpaca turned into a killer. Graphs were shown to display increasing violent behavior of the alpaca. Another set of graphs were shown to display the increasing violent behavior of the surrounding community in relation to the alpaca search. Look at that rapidly escalating curve 4 weeks into the alpaca's escape. This is the focal point. Look at the rising casualty rate. Look at the rising death rate. Both are compounding. Alpacas can run at a top speed of 35 miles per hour. An adult alpaca can weigh 100 to 190 pounds. Imagine you are casually hiking through the woods and a fully grown alpaca is racing towards you, full speed, making squeals and grunts. The force of impact could be deadly. There were a lot of domesticated alpacas in Deptford. One of the incentives of ownership was that these domesticated alpacas helped fulfill a requisite for preferential tax treatment. Caution was advised to volunteers, search groups, and reporters. Eventually, the local community organizations found it too controversial to partake in search groups and no longer endorsed the opportunity to the public. All the search groups were soon organized off the books. Some participants thought to kill the alpaca because they believed that the alpaca itself caused the violence, and the idea was that killing the alpaca would thereby end the violence. The plan was to kill the alpaca and put it on display, send a message to the violent participants in the search. Violence was the answer, so it seemed. It was ironic. Of course, with my long and shaggy head of hair, if I were to be any animal, I would surely be an alpaca. There soon became an entire group of alpaca hunters. Many other families' alpacas were killed throughout this time. The reward for the missing alpacas skyrocketed. Whoever cashed in the reward would be set for many lifetimes. Most alpacas went for a radically smaller number. No one knew who posted the flyers. Not even the owner of the missing alpaca knew the benefactor. No one knew how the reward money was funded. No one asked how the reward money was funded either. That wasn't the question people wanted answered. There were a few search groups made for the person posting the flyers. Maybe they searched for this person for answers. Maybe they searched for this person to steal the reward money at the source. Many were afraid to look after the benefactor. An individual with that much money could eliminate any intervening figure and erase all record of them. Still, the searches continued. The alpaca was yet to be recovered. Families created advanced forms of protection for their pet alpacas. Electric fences outlined the alpaca's pens. Bear traps were set for potential alpaca hunters. A few alpacas became injured from their own protection. Families paid their alpaca handlers to surveil their property and to watch their alpacas' moves around the clock. Some participants in the search paid off the alpaca handlers. Some alpaca handlers were killed, and the participants in the search blamed the alpaca for the cause of the alpaca handlers' untimely deaths. All the flyers were printed at the Deptford Public Library. None of the Deptford Public Library employees had any knowledge when questioned by reporters. It was rumored that the Deptford Public Library employees paid the reporters off. Or was it that the benefactor paid the Deptford Public Library employees off so that they could pay the reporters off? To provide emotional support for the family of the missing alpaca, my mother's kindergarten class sent drawings of alpacas to the family. Piles of construction paper were delivered and stuffed in the mailbox. The drawings were filled with misshapen hoofs and scribbles of shaggy alpaca manes. Most of them were labeled with the incorrect spelling of alpaca. Some letters were written backwards. Some students spelled alpaca with made-up letters. Some students drew pictures of the alpaca, or tried to draw pictures of the alpaca. The students were still learning their shapes, numbers, phonics, and alphabet. One time, I dropped off a batch of the drawings myself. The family never responded to the students' kind gesture. The overfilled mailbox appeared as though it was never even checked. There appeared to be a negligence in their taking care of their inventory and their property's interior. This might have been one of the reasons why this particular family's alpaca was capable of escaping. The fence that outlined the family's property began to slant over since it was first put up. Pages of the construction paper leaked out of the mailbox and clogged up the storm drain on the side of the road. Towards the end of the search, a psychic was hired to leverage supernatural forces so as to effectively locate the missing alpaca. The psychic led an off-the-books search group to a ravine on the side of a nearby horse trail. A teenager in the group spotted the body of a local politician tied to a boulder by the running water. The local politician was never reported to be missing. The psychic was onto something. Reporters questioned the psychic at a crowded press release. So many people packed the room, eager to hear the psychic's next prediction. As the press release was about to conclude, the psychic closed their eyes. The psychic looked as though they were in a trance-like state. Cameras flashed. The psychic looked directly at the live camera and said, "This year, the will be assassinated." The reporter stammered, "That's your next prediction?" "No. That is a prophecy." The psychic was quickly apprehended.